Welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia. My name is Laura Kovacs, and I'm honored this evening to introduce our two guests. In Stephanie Powell Watts's powerfully rendered, prize-winning stories in the collection, We Are Taking Only What We Need, working-class African Americans search for meaning and direction in lives shaped by forces beyond their control. A review for O, the Oprah Magazine, says the stories celebrate real people and their tenacious ability to break down life's locked doors, building to a kaleidoscopic understanding of both the individual and the collective experience over the last 50 years in the American South. She is also the author of the novel No One Is Coming to Save Us, a Great Gatsby-esque tale of African Americans in Jim Crow, North Carolina. The book was named one of the best books of 2017 by a raft of publications and earned Miss Watts an NAACP Image Award for outstanding literary work. Centered mostly in the urban South, Tayari Jones's 4 novels include Silver Sparrow, The Untelling, and Leaving Atlanta, winner of the Hurston Wright Award for debut fiction. Her new novel, An American Marriage, follows a husband and wife who seem to embody the New South but are unmoored by false imprisonment and accusation. In her New York Times review of the book, her fellow guest this evening calls it wise and compassionate, saying it warns us to awaken our compassion and empathy. 2 weeks ago, Oprah Winfrey announced the book as her latest pick for her amazingly popular book club. In a video on her website, she says, "It is among Tayari's many gifts that she can touch us soul to soul with her words." She also announced that her production company will produce a film adaptation of the book. Please first welcome Stephanie Powell Watts to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thanks to the library and to all of you in attendance, and especially to Tayari. I'm so thrilled to be reading with you. I've loved her work for some time, not because she's older, but because I'm slower. And she is a writer of great skill and talent, and love for her characters, and I'm really thrilled to be here reading with her tonight. This is a busy and important week. It's Mardi Gras, of course, and just yesterday, the official portraits of the Obamas were unveiled. Has everybody seen them? They're stunning. They're both gorgeous, and I was lucky enough to have the artist Amy Sherrill do the covers for my books, and this is the cover for No One Is Coming to Save Us. I can see the Michelle Obama in that cover, and this is the short stories that she's redone. I just think they're gorgeous and amazing, and the Kehinde Wiley, the painting, was gorgeous too, of President Obama. Really beautiful painting, but I'm really struck by the one that Amy did, and by the covers that she did, because I think that she's doing something really fascinating with the covers. She has this profound moment of connection that you have with the women that are on the covers of the books, and also with Michelle Obama. But especially with Michelle Obama, you see things about her that are not immediately apparent, that aren't immediately visible. And as an artist, she allows you to see a world and a vision of Obama that we don't necessarily think of. And when you guys saw it, did you think she looked like Malia? Did you think that? I thought so. As soon as I saw it, I thought, there is her child's face, in that painting. And I think I had never thought of that before. I mean, of course, you see them, and you see them with their children, and you think that there is some obvious family resemblance, but I never really saw that innocence, that vulnerability, and at the same time, she's still moving mountains, and doing something that no one has ever done. And so I love that fierceness, the determination, and I love the idea that the artist, if the artist is doing his or her job, that the person can show you something you didn't even know that you knew about the person. And so I feel like that Amy Sherald is doing that, and I'm hoping that as a writer that I'm trying to do that for my characters, showing you some side of the character that maybe you hadn't considered, or even if you had considered, you'd forgotten about that person. I write mostly about African American women, and most of the characters have a kind of strength and poise and determination, but they also have that innocence and those moments of vulnerability that you don't necessarily see because they don't let you see it all that often. I just want to read a very short excerpt from one of my stories. This is from We're Taking Only What We Need, and this collection is mostly about young women who are adolescents, and I want to read from a story called Unassigned Territory. This is a story about a young Jehovah's Witness. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. My mother and my brother are still Jehovah's Witnesses, and so there's a lot about this world that I know about. And in fact, the character's name is Stephanie, though she's not exactly me. But this story is called Unassigned Territory, and that I think will become apparent why that's the title in just a couple seconds. Leslie Pawlowski parks her blue Horizon on the shoulder of the dirt road, the best shade we can find. July is a killer in North Carolina, hot as blazes, hot enough for you, hot enough to fry eggs, and on and on. We are in the thick of it, mid-morning, our dresses clinging to our backs, way far in the middle of nowhere, preaching door to door, working in our congregation's unassigned territory. This is the kind of dirt road, hee-haw, overall, straw in the teeth, even Southerners make fun of. Pikes and Wagner's country. Did you hear the one about the Pike girl who went to a town doctor? The doctor says to her mother, "Mama, has this girl had intercourse?" And the mother, hands wringing, says, "I don't rightly know, doctor, but if she needs it, you make sure you give it to her." The passenger side window sticks in the middle of going up or down. It's a piece of junk car. And on the way to every door, we shed bits of polyfoam from the car's cracked upholstery. Leslie has a great attitude about her poverty. Halcyon salad days she will remember with a withering chuckle when her future kids complain of their own first cars. We've visited too many houses without updating our field service records, and we stop before we forget the details. We need to keep records for ourselves, for the congregation file on the territory, and for the official log we store at the Kingdom Hall. What was that woman's name in the blue trailer? I shuffle through my notebooks, knowing I won't find anything useful. You're supposed to write things like Ruth Boaz, 123 Main Street, blue trailer, lived in town all her life, no husband in the house, 4 kids, 1 still at home, took the July 1989 awake, making the most of your youth, expressed an interest in tarot, Bring magazine, Why Godly People Shun Spiritism. My records are, to say the least, incomplete. I wrote, trailer is a nightmare. Looks like the time my brother and I played drug czar with an old suitcase and Monopoly money. Ryan threw my clothes and shoes out of the dresser and the closet screaming, "Where's the real stash? Where's the real stash?" I'm praying that Leslie won't ask to see what I've written. I've been at this long enough that I don't need any guidance from my field service partner. And sometimes Leslie, though, will say things like, "You're writing a book over there, aren't you?" But she never pries. Shoot, I hate to leave her name off. She was nice too, Leslie sighs. Nice to Leslie means that she didn't cuss us, that she didn't shoo us away, she didn't hide behind her curtains, her hand over the mouth of her child like a kidnapper. "But Mama," the kid would manage through her fingers, "there's some girls on the porch." "Shh," I imagine her saying. "Do you want to be saved? Is that what you want?" This lady has stood on a rickety porch, sullen and quiet, her eyes never leaving my brown face. Leslie, even with her Minnesota accent, was apparently okay. Brown woman on the porch trumps Yankee invader any day. To be fair, they didn't get too many Black Jehovah's Witnesses out here. There are only 2 Black Jehovah's Witnesses family in town for a total of 6 people. Jehovah's Witness families in town, besides our congregation, got to every door in the city limit at least 3 times a year. This was the unassigned territory, though. This was a deliverance of woods, of creeks, of black snakes, and it got worked only once a year if we were lucky. More likely, these people won't see any of us for 18 to 24 months. Imagine the odds of seeing a Black Jehovah's Witness in this territory. That's lotto odds. Besides seeing no Black people, there are 4 important things to remember about the unassigned territory. You are as remote as you can get in this new world. Way out in the boonies, mostly white Southerners who've been holed up here for generations, living on winding dirt roads that lead to more winding dirt roads, with houses, the occasional mansion, but mostly trailers and shacks out of sight from each other. They like it that way. 2, everybody and his dog has a dog. At least one loose, ugly mutt with cockleburrs in his unloved fur and filled with the kind of hatred that only comes from at last finding a body more miserable than yourself. 3, apparently the trauma of a visit from Jehovah's Witnesses is so great that just the glimpse of your watchtower will act as a mnemonic, causing the householder to wax nostalgic about your last visit. Never mind that someone from your congregation left a tract in the door 2 years ago. You will hear over and over, "Some of y'all was just here." For there is nothing at all good about the unassigned territory. Thank you.
Hello, how are y'all doing? I'm feeling pretty good. I'm delighted to be here, and Stephanie, thank you for that reading. I'm just going to jump in and read from my new novel, An American Marriage. It's the story of a young couple. They've only been married 18 months. You know, she says her daddy was still paying for the wedding when her husband is arrested for a crime he does not commit. And I'm going to read a little bit from her point of view from the day he's arrested, and then a couple of their letters from when he's in jail. His name is Roy. Her name is Celeste. What I know is this: they didn't believe me. 12 people, and not one of them took me at my word. There, in the front of the room, I explained that Roy couldn't have raped the woman in room 206 because we had been together. I told them about the magic fingers that wouldn't work, about the movie that played on the snowy television. The prosecutor asked me what we had been fighting about. Rattled, I looked to Roy and to both our mothers. My Uncle Banks, the lawyer, objected, so I didn't have to answer, but the pause made it appear that I was concealing something rotten at the pit of our very young marriage. Even before I stepped down from the witness stand, I knew that I had failed him. Maybe I wasn't appealing enough, not dramatic enough, too not from around here. Who knows? Uncle Banks, coaching me, had said, now is not the time to be articulate. Now is the time to give it up. No filter, all heart. No matter what you're asked, what the jury wants to see is why you married him. I tried, but I didn't know how to be anything other than well-spoken in front of strangers. I wish I could have brought a selection of my art, the Man Moving series, all images of Roy, the marble, the dolls, and a few watercolors. I would say, this is who he is to me. Isn't he beautiful? Isn't he gentle? But all I had were words which were light and flimsy as air. As I took my seat, not even the black lady juror would look me in the face. It turns out that I watch too much television. I was expecting a scientist to come and testify about DNA. I was looking for a pair of handsome detectives to burst into the courtroom at the last minute, whispering something urgent to the prosecutor. Everyone would see that this was a big mistake, a major misunderstanding. We would all be shaken but appeased. I fully believed that I would leave the courtroom with my husband beside me. Secure in our home, we would tell people how no black man is really safe in America. 12 years is what they gave him. We would be 43 years old before he was released. I couldn't even imagine myself at such an age. Roy understood that 12 years was an eternity because he sobbed right there at the defendant's table. His knees gave way and he fell into his chair. The judge paused and demanded that Roy bear this news on his feet. He stood again and cried, not like a baby, but in the way that only a grown man can cry, from the bottom of his feet up through his torso and finally through his mouth. When a man wails like that, you know it's all the tears he was never allowed to shed, from Little League disappointment to teenage heartbreak, all the way to whatever injured his spirit just last year. As Roy howled, my fingers kept worrying a rough patch of skin beneath my chin, a souvenir of scar tissue. When they did what I remember as kicking in the door, but what everyone else remembers as opening it with a key, after the door was open, however it was open, we were both pulled from the bed. They dragged Roy into the parking lot, and I followed, lunging for him, wearing nothing but a white slip. Somebody pushed me to the ground, and my chin hit the pavement. My slip rode up, showing everything to everyone as my tooth sank into the soft skin of my bottom lip. Roy was on the asphalt beside me, barely beyond my grasp, speaking words that didn't reach my ears. I don't know how long we lay there, parallel like burial plots. Husband, wife, what God has brought together, let no man tear asunder. This is her first letter to him, and then I'll read his response. Dear Roy, I'm writing this letter at the kitchen table. I'm alone in a way that's more than the fact that I'm the only living person within these walls. Up until now, I thought I knew what was and wasn't possible. Maybe that's what innocence is, having no way to predict the pain of the future. When something happens that eclipses the imaginable, it changes a person. It's like the difference between a raw egg and a scrambled egg. It's the same thing, but it's not the same at all. That's the best way that I can put it. I look in the mirror and I know it's me, but I can't quite recognize myself. Sometimes it's exhausting for me simply to walk into the house. I try to calm myself and remember that I lived alone before. Sleeping by myself didn't kill me then, and it will not kill me now. But this is what loss has taught me of love. Love makes a place in your life. It makes a place for itself in your bed. Invisibly, it makes a place in your body, rerouting all your blood vessels and throbbing right alongside your heart. When it's gone, nothing is whole again. Before I met you, I was not lonely, but now I'm so lonely that I talk to the walls. They said you can't receive mail for at least a month. Still, I will write to you every day. Love, Celestial. And then he writes back, and this will be the last one I'll read. Dear Celestial, I don't think that I have written a letter to anyone since I was in high school and assigned a French pen pal, and that whole thing lasted about 10 minutes. I know for sure that this is the first time I ever wrote a love letter, and that's what this is going to be. Celestial, I love you, I missed you, I want to come home to you, but look at me telling you the things you already know. I'm trying to write something on this paper that'll make you remember me, the real me, not the man you saw standing in a broke-down country courtroom, broke down myself. I was too ashamed to turn toward you, but now I wish I had because I would do anything for one more look. This love letter thing is uphill for me. I've never even seen one unless you count the third grade. Do you like me? Yes, no? A love letter is supposed to be like music or like Shakespeare, but I don't know anything about Shakespeare. But for real, I want to tell you what you mean to me, but it's like trying to count the seconds of the day on your fingers and toes. Why didn't I write you love letters all the while so I could be in practice? Then I would know what to do. That's how I feel every day here, like I don't know what to do or how to do it. I've always let you know how much I care, right? You never had to wonder. I'm not a man for words. My daddy showed me that you do for a woman. Remember that time you damn near had a nervous breakdown because it looked like the tree in the front yard was thinking about dying? Where I'm from, we don't believe in spending money on pets, let alone trees. But I couldn't bear to see you fret, so I hired a tree doctor. See, in my mind, that was a love letter. The first thing I did as your husband was sit you down, like the old folks say. You were wasting your time and talents doing temp work. You wanted to be an artist, so I let it happen. No strings. That was my love letter to say, I got this. Do what you need to do to be happy. But now, all I have is this paper and this raggedy ink pen. It's a ballpoint, but they take the casing away, so you just have the nib and this plastic tube of ink. I'm looking at it thinking, this is all I have to be a husband with? But here I am trying. Love, Roy.
My question is actually about what you said in your what you were reading about being. I know that you write about Spell House, right? The Atlanta
I do.
folk. The dichotomy of being, upper middle class or a middle class black person, and thinking in your living room like, we could never be safe, but in the courtroom, it being unimaginable that you could potentially have to deal with the state of white supremacy in the United States. I was just wondering what you think about those movements as we are in the political sphere that we live in today, and kind of how you imagine that playing out.
I mean, I think class does matter, definitely. I think that there's a sense that, like Celestial says, she thought they would go home safely and they would say that no black man is safe in America because her husband had been accused and tried, but she didn't know the extent of it, right? I think that the idea that no black man is safe in America to her was like something that people say. Like, I know I definitely grew up hearing that all the time, but I didn't feel it in a day-to-day way. And so, and for most of her life, well, all of her life, that her class privilege has in fact shielded her. Class does matter. Like when you look at, for example, remember when Skip Gates got arrested trying to go into his own house? I always say though, Skip Gates was angry, he was humiliated, and he walked away alive. Whereupon Michael Brown, Philando Castile, they did not walk away, but they were from a different class background. So class matters. The question is really how much. Class cannot save you from racism, but it helps your chances a little bit. You know what I mean? And that is the conflict. That's part of the conflict that's going on. And it was kind of tricky for me in writing about it because I do think there is a sense that if we are taking a firm stance against racism, then we should say nothing matters, like not to admit the way things are mitigated because I think it fractures our coalition. Like our coalition is stronger if we say each of us is at the exact same risk. Don't think that your PhD is going to save you. Each of us is at the exact same risk. It makes our coalition strong, but it's not exactly true. But it is true that your PhD can't save you. So it's all these things at once. Where are you at on this, Stephanie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one of the things that I really love about your book. This looking at this issue from a different stance, and I do think that the class issues are huge ones, but when it comes down to it, they were still in a position. They still were not in a position to move to a place of innocence, and I think that's one of the things that your book explores that I think is fascinating. The idea of Black innocence, and both of the characters talk about being innocent or not being innocent over and over again, and how Celestial has this wonderful line about that's what innocence is, not knowing the pain of the future. And so there is there's a way in which they are both innocent and not innocent. They realize that this could happen, but they're not quite sure that it could happen to them. And I think that's a wonderful way to present the book.
But in your novel, you have a character who's in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, I think that prison I feel like it's such a thread going through the culture that it goes through the culture almost invisibly because it's always there.
Yes. Yes, and these are people that I wanted to explore. Those people who get forgotten, who go to prison, and my character, his family has all decided that they're not interested in him anymore. Not because they don't love him exactly, but because they have to keep moving forward, and he's stagnant. He's there for as long as he's got to be there, and so they can't invest in him in a certain kind of way. And unlike your character, he did do things to put himself in that position, but as my grandmother always said, once you get in that position, you're going to be hit hard. So, and he's hit hard for relatively minor crimes.
Okay, go ahead.
I read your interview in the BuzzFeed where you talked about how this book came to be called American Marriage and all the implications of that and all the weight that came to that, and how you were a little maybe hesitant at first to accept that mantle, but obviously you came to agree that that should be the title. I was just wondering if you could talk about that process for the benefit of this audience.
This title, An American Marriage, was not my original title. I had a number of titles. I'm not great at titles. Some people are good at them, some people aren't. I'm not. And it was determined that we needed a new title, a new, better title, because I had changed it a few times into writing it. I had one editor, and the title of it used to be, I'm almost embarrassed about the old titles. I feel like let's just say I used to have a title. But I felt like when she read the book with the other title, that it seemed too almost sociological. Like it made it seem like my novel was like the musical version of the new Jim Crow. Like it was just using the characters to animate a discussion of a problem. So then I decided for the new editor, I really wanted the new editor to read this as a love story about a love triangle. I don't think that's a spoiler. There is another dude. But, and I wanted him to read it as a love triangle, so I gave it like a really romantic title. And I knew that wasn't going to stick, but I just wanted to guide him in his expectations. So now we needed a new title. And so he said, we're going to brainstorm. No judgment in brainstorming. Everyone just say what comes to their mind. So I said, jokingly, we should call it An American Marriage. I was like, that sounds great. I said, my cat is writing a memoir, and it's called An American Feline, and it's going to be a big hit because it sounds important. And he was like, I like it. I was like, no. We distinctly said we were brainstorming and that no one was judging anyone, and we were just going to say what came to our minds. So I kept sending him new titles, but he was really invested in American Marriage. And I said, I don't like it. I said, it sounds to me like An American Marriage sounds to me like a book about some white people in Connecticut experiencing emotions. And he says, well, he's a very serious guy. He doesn't joke back with me. He says, well, Connecticut is a very small state, and so why would you think that what happens to some white people in Connecticut is more American than what happens to your characters in Atlanta? There are more people in Atlanta than the entire state of Connecticut, he says. And I really realized that I had never been talked about as an American without black in front of it, or African American. Even when I travel abroad, to other countries, people say, oh, there was an American in here, and it was black. Like that's how they talk about it. So I never considered myself as an American just in a standalone way. And so I was not comfortable with it, but I spoke to my mentor, and she said, this is your home. You are American, this is your home. A lot of people died for this to be your home. This is your home. And then I had to bounce it off my dad, who's, big, he's like Marxist, anti-imperialist. I was like, Daddy, well, if I said this book was called An American Marriage, because, we are American, what would you think? And I was lucky that he was like, sounds like some sound reasoning. So I was like, okay, Daddy says the reasoning is sound. So I was leaning toward it, but then I still didn't want to pull the trigger, and my editor called me up again. He's a very patient man. He called me up again, and he said, is it that you don't think this title represents the book? Or is it that you are afraid that the title is you laying claim to big ideas? That you're writing a big novel about big ideas and you're scared to claim it for yourself? Are you embarrassed? I did feel kind of embarrassed, or like it wasn't humble. And he said, I implore you to change your mind. The book can stand up to the title. And so I said to him, I looked him in the face as well as you can over the phone, and I said, let me think about it. And then by Monday morning, I just decided to take that chance on myself. And I said, let's do it. And little did I know, they already had covers mocked up with this title.
Look, I'm just wondering, both of you as artists that give a whole lot of stuff, a lot of thought, and filter it through tons of creativity. How do you see the struggle that we are in the midst of, not just the struggle right now, this minute, and blah, 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 but the one that's been going on the whole time? How do you all see it? How does it, what are the salient points that you see when you look at it and consider that, we are in for this one over a haul? And what's the artist's role in terms of this from your perspective? I hope that makes some sense.
Stephanie?
Well, I think thank you for the question. I think this is a really important question for now, because we're in a position where a lot of we feel like that a lot of things that maybe we took for granted, or maybe we were just starting to become part of, particularly if you are African American and you're moving into a middle class, if that's your space, that a lot of those kinds of things are being eroded, and a lot of the gains that we've had, or that we thought that we had, or we hoped that we had, have been eroded. So I think it's more important than ever, at least in my lifetime, to speak about those kinds of things. And I'm the sort of person. I'm Southern. I'm a woman. Maybe that's part of the way that I think. But I feel like that we need to have a kind of civil discourse, even with uncivil people, and that we have to find a way to be able to say what we need and what we feel, and what's going to make our lives better in a civil and sophisticated way.
This question of I feel like the artist has the same responsibility as everyone. I mean, we all have a responsibility to try and turn the tide, right? Like, each person has responsibility, whatever they do, to do it in such a way that we're trying to push back against these forces which are trying to take us back in time. So I definitely believe that. But I think part of the challenge as an artist is that, like when I was writing this novel about, a man who's been wrongfully incarcerated and about his wife, I had to not make this novel all about their brave fight to be free, like that kind of propagandistic way. Because I felt like when I started this book, I was researching wrongful incarceration, and I was enraged, but I was enraged but not intrigued. Because, the thing about wrongful incarceration is that it's wrongful, right? So there's nothing else to say on the subject. You can't just be locking people up for things they didn't do. So I didn't feel the motivating conflict for me to read a novel. I write a novel toward the place of ambiguity, and that's what makes it eager to turn the pages, because you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what they should do. But if I lean too hard on the one man against the criminal justice system, you know what's right and what's wrong. So instead, I really looked at the question of loyalty in this marriage, how much, and I think that's what makes it, as far as ideologically, an intersectional novel, because while his struggle, which is primarily a racial struggle about being wrongfully incarcerated, what about her desire for autonomy in her own life? She has the same question all people have in relationships, which is, to what extent do I dedicate my emotional, personal resources to the other person? How much do I put back for myself? And how is this then complicated by the fact that her husband is wrongfully incarcerated? It's the fact that her husband is wrongfully incarcerated. He's a black man in prison for a rape he didn't commit. Does that mean then that she no longer has the right to pursue her dream as an artist? Is that justice? Like you said, that they both say they're innocent. He says, but I'm innocent. And she says, I'm innocent too. Mm-hmm. And that is a question that I really leaned on. And I felt like almost in writing this, I felt almost like maybe I was cheating on the struggle, because, the struggle is all about the government and how they're treating this innocent black man. But then I felt like I got to tell the truth as I see it. And that is a scary thing for me, because to tell a complicated story sometimes seems to shake the foundation of the thing we believe, but sometimes the foundation could use a little shake, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, you know, there was a time for something like a misery narrative, you know, and I mean that really, it's your left.
Did you say a misery narrative?
Yes. But, you know, I mean, when you're thinking about the situations of enslaved people and people writing their own stories, like Linda Brent and Harriet Jacobs. You know, this woman was in a place she couldn't even stand up for 7 years, hiding out to try to escape. And that is an unambiguous narrative, and it should be. But I think that the place of the artist in contemporary life is not about the misery narrative. It is about ambiguity. It's about saying that things are not always even as they seem, and people have foibles and weaknesses, and we have to show those at the same time that we show, perhaps in this case and in the case of my novel, some great injustices and social injustices.
Maybe our role as writers is to get the conversation going. Like maybe our role is to raise the questions more so than provide the answers.
I think that's right.
On a lighter note, I like to know where you were and what you did. Right.
I knew it. I told Stephanie, I was like, I'm not going to tell you I'm awake because somebody's going to ask me. All right, so I'm in Vegas, Las Vegas, for a year. I have a fellowship out there. And so I'm driving. I'm in Las Vegas. You know, I've gone to see the Cirque du Soleil. I love the Cirque du Soleil. I was going to see Cirque du Soleil. I was feeling good. And the phone rang. And it was like 9 o'clock in Las Vegas, and that's like midnight on this coast. So I was like, who's calling me at midnight? Might be something good, right? So I was like, hello, my best voice, hello. And the person on the other side of the phone said, hi, this is Oprah. And I'm going to tell you, Oprah Winfrey's voice is so distinct. She didn't have to say her name. It was Oprah. I didn't say, is this really Oprah? It was Oprah. I had to pull over. I had to pull the car over. And I think that she's very accustomed to calling people and they freak out, so she gave me some freak out time. I felt like she was like, while I went through all the emotions, you know, I did like the nervous giggling, I did the, oh my God, and then after a while she cut me off, I think I went over. I think I probably got my full 30 seconds, because, you know, she's a busy person. She can't sit here all day and listen to me freak out. And she said, I read your book, I really like it, and I would like to use it for my book club. What do you think? And I was like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And it was really great, but here's the thing. I found this out in October. So for all these months, I had this huge secret. And people would call me on the phone and say, so how are things going with your book? I was like, I'm hopeful. And my dad kept saying, you know what, you need to call Oprah. And I was like, maybe. And so you can't tell, because, you know, the rollout has to be a big surprise. So I got really close to my publicist because he knew, because even very few people at the publishing house know. So even when you go to visit the publisher to look at your cover or something, you don't know who knows and who doesn't. So you're saying things like, so, you heard anything exciting? And you look at their face. Yeah, so it was a lot, but one thing I'm really grateful about the long lead up is that it gave me time to prepare myself for all this excitement. I'm in a different city every day from now until March 22nd, but I knew that was coming. So I was, you know, able, I packed a whole bunch of trial suitcases. I'm doing it with a carry-on bag. I'm very proud of that. Also, if you're on a plane every day and you spend 45 minutes to an hour a day waiting for your luggage, over time that accumulates, you see?
Somebody said save that $25 too.
Yes.
I want to know possibly if you could both talk about the nature of sacrifice and gender, specifically sacrifice and Black women.
In literature or
Or in your life.
or in
Well,
life?
Actually, I was.
But I think each
that's-
one of us
I did-
sacrificed something today.
Well, I guess specifically the characters, but then also an extension of, I guess, how you guys lived your lives, and I don't know at all if the characters are loosely or at all, based on some experiences you have. So I guess you can intertwine both if possible. And I don't know if that was super vague. But.
No. It's a really interesting question because I think about this. I actually think about this a lot, and in comparing my life with the lives of my mother and my grandmother, and how comparatively easy it is. And I think about their, in particular, the way their mindsets. The things that they could expect out of life, and the things that they knew that they would not have, and either because of class or because of where they grew up, or what they knew or what they didn't know, and so I feel that really acutely all the time, and I really want to try to do the best I can do with my time and my energy and whatever I can do with the literature, because I feel like in some ways I'm carrying that and carrying their sacrifice. I get to do some things because they didn't, and so that's really deep with me, and it's always kind of with me.
I mean, the question of Black female sacrifice is at the center of this novel. It's actually, when I first started writing it, how I came to write it. I overheard a couple in the mall arguing. And the woman, I'm so nosy. I'm an incredibly nosy person. And the woman, okay, inquisitive. I'm deeply curious about what other people are doing. And I heard the woman, and she said, "Roy, you know you wouldn't have waited on me for 5 years." And he said, "I don't know what you're talking about. This wouldn't have happened to you in the first place." And I felt that conflict was so intriguing because, I didn't know him. I was pretty sure he wouldn't have waited for her no 5 years. I was fairly certain of it. Even though I didn't know him, I was like, yeah, you're right. But when he said this wouldn't have happened to you, I realized that he felt that the question of reciprocity was a moot point because it wouldn't happen. Like, he felt like, why are you talking about something that would never, how I would react in a hypothetical situation that would never happen? And I was like, that's true, but no. But no. And that's how I know I have a novel, when I can see both sides. But I do think that, Roy, my character Roy, he doesn't realize it, but he has lived his entire life due to what he realizes is the vast generosity of women, right? Like, his mother, she lives for him. Like, his mother has arranged her whole life around keeping her son safe. And he appreciates it, but he doesn't really see that's a choice. It's kind of how, like, when you're little and you don't understand that your mother doesn't have to give you that bowl of cereal in the morning. You think you wake up and your mother produces a bowl of cereal, because that's what they do. Like, you don't realize that it's something she's giving to you. And he has lived his whole life like that. Like, as a Black man, he went to college, first generation. Everyone looks at him like, this good, yes, what you do is amazing. You just walking around is just important, and keep walking around. So all his life he's been treated that way, but it's been invisible to him because he's always had it. He understands himself to be a person of no privilege because he is vulnerable to the penal system and all this kind of thing. So the idea that he occupies privilege in his own community has not crossed his mind until he walked across my book, and then he came to see that. And all the women sacrifice, or this idea of loyalty. When he meets Celeste, he likes that she's this independent woman, that she's an artist, that she's doing her own thing, that she went to Spelman, all these things. But when he is arrested, he wants to be almost like in the Odyssey, like when Odysseus sails the 7 seas and all he wants is to come home and find a clean house and a chaste woman. So he's trying to party like it's 400 BC. Like what he wants is the same as what they wanted in 400 BC. But I do think that this is part of our culture, right? Like, if you even think about it, the founders of Black Lives Matter are women. We're women, and I think most of them were queer women. Queer Black women created an organization in response to police violence against Black men. Like, they understood that to be an important mission, and it is. But idea of, I won't say I can't imagine it, but I would be surprised if there was an organization of men being like, we have to get together to protect these queer black women. They're endangered, fellas. Fellas, we need to get t-shirts, the whole nine. We got to do something. So I do think that this is something that I was engaging, like, how can we argue? We need to figure out how to protect each other, make that street a two-way street.
Thank you for coming. This is my first time here at the library, and it will not be the last. But I have a question with regards to your prison. Both of your characters, you have characters that are both in prison. What research did you do, and how did you come to that place of writing from, the perspective of being in prison? Well, I did quite a bit of research, and with research, there's so much of it you do to kind of get a feel for what's going on, and there's not very much of it you actually use, a detail here or there, but you need that background. And I talked to someone who had been incarcerated for some time too, to just get his perspective. Someone that I think is both a wise and super intelligent person, just to get his feeling about what it felt like to him to be in that space. So there's a lot of things about prison and about that felt so, I don't know, banal or ordinary or day to day, and that was scarier to me than just about anything. That it felt so ordinary for so many people.
I was able to handle it a lot by all the time that Rory's in prison. I used the letters between him and Celeste, and that to me was able to get at the emotional part of it without dealing with the day-to-day details of prison, because in a book, a little violence goes a long way. Like, that reality of prison is so brutal that were I to have done it like in a normal first-person narrative, I got up, I did this, I did that. When you read a novel, you experience the characters' feelings vicariously, and if you had to be 150 pages in prison, I don't think your experience with the book would be as engaging, and I want to even say pleasurable. So I had to figure out how that I could do it, how I could let you know what it's like without subjecting you to it. And in the research I did, I looked at the little details, like the detail that I read all these oral histories of people who are in prison, so many oral histories. And one of the things that this one man spoke about in his oral history that was so interesting to me was he had this intense craving for fresh fruit. And that just seemed to be just the embodiment of this deprivation. He just wanted that fresh taste, and he did something in order to get, I think it was a plum, the real life man. He did something, and that has haunted him ever since. And I used that here in that Roy wants this red pear, and it becomes this symbol throughout. And so it was those little details that got me. But then there's stuff that didn't make it, like the incredible expense of anything you want to have in prison. Everything is anything you want, like new underwear, socks, you have to buy it. And if you don't have someone outside that's able to pay for you, you have these jobs that pay pennies an hour. Just all that deprivation, I thought, really captured it. But there was something I was going to say about all this money. And the phone calls, just everything's so expensive. But it also got, I don't know, when you did your prison research, it got monotonous. The awfulness got monotonous. Yeah. It was just like, oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's terrible. That is terrible. Like, it just kept going like that, terrible, terrible, terrible. And my eyes started glazing over. So I didn't use it all.
Mm-hmm. Hi, so this question is for the both of y'all. One thing I've noticed, is that your work often gets sort of described as tales of the New South. I know Ms. Jones, one of the things I really loved about In American Marriage is how even though Roy kind of feels like he's outgrown his hometown, you sort of go back there and really center at the people there who have sort of sustained him even after, the big city's kind of forgotten about him. And to me, Elo, Louisiana Red is a place that's very traditional Southern town. And Miss Watts is a fellow Carolinian. I'm really enjoying your depiction of the lesser Carolina, I have to say that. But for political reasons, we all know, that North Carolina has fallen victim to like some really old conservatism. So do you all think that notion of the New South is helpful? Do you think it misses something about what you're trying to do in your work? Just curious about that.
I live in Brooklyn, right? And I feel like people in Brooklyn, they act like I got up there on the Underground Railroad. They cannot understand that the South is a modern, current place. So I think that we use the New South really to mean anything after the Civil War is what people really mean. It's helpful to me because I do love my hometown, and I am very resistant, though, even though we are seeing, of course, like all these really disturbing rollbacks of freedoms and rights, but I never want to lose the fact that the South also, though, is a place of Black prosperity. We have our, I'm a graduate of Spelman College. There's nowhere else like Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, AU. Like, we have so many Black institutions. They take care of us in the South. Like, when I'm up in New York, there is nothing like that. I mean, like in Atlanta, I went to see a relative of mine. She's an old lady, and I had a cold, and I asked her, I need to go to the doctor because it's not getting better. And she said, honey, I have a doctor, he's good. She paused, and she said, he didn't go to Morehouse. She said, but he went to Harvard, and he's good. And I feel that only in the South is a place where someone would be unsure if someone went to Harvard could treat my cold. I had a cold. I was not dying. I had a cold. And that is something that I think is really meaningful about the South, and I don't want to lose that and just make the South shorthand for Black misery, Black stifled opportunity, because I just don't think it's true.
No, I don't either. But I do feel like this, the whole idea of the New South, I don't know if you've experienced this returning. It's just, it feels like branding. It feels like and in some ways it feels like that we're jumping over a really crucial, important part of history. And I understand it. I mean, who wants to revisit the ways in which, particularly the majority culture, did things poorly? So, I mean, who wants to do that? So, I mean, I understand the impulse, but it feels a little like we can't get to the New South until we re-examine what happened in the past South, in the old South,
or even what is. But see, I think because y'all live in Brooklyn, and people, I don't know. I feel like people are so smug because they have quarantined all America's racial ills to the South. Like, it's all there, locked down over there, and we up here are so much better. And so I really, and it's probably, like I said, it's just because of where I live that I'm always challenging that, because I feel like I'm challenging it every day in my day-to-day life.
Oh, I totally know what you mean.
And then, though, don't you feel that as a Black writer, you're not often considered, it's interesting that you say that we're considered Southern writers. I feel like we're often not considered Southern writers. I'm a member of the Fellowship of Southern Writers, and we have very few Black members of the fellowship. So I also feel that as a Black writer, like a lot of my white peers who are Southern writers are trying to, I'm not just a regional writer, they say, I'm an American writer. Like, they don't want the label, but I think you always want to get into the party you've been excluded from. So since I haven't been considered a Southern writer, I go around saying it all the time. I'm a Southern writer, I'm a Southern writer. So I don't know, I forget my point, but yeah, I think you're right.
Thank you both for really an awesome, electrifying discussion. This was terrific. But
that's nice.
But I wanted to compliment you both on one specific thing, which I think is one of the real treats of this series, is the readings that you did at the beginning. I personally think hearing even a snippet makes you a better reader, because at least you start to think a little bit about the voice and the cadence and maybe what the author was intending. You read it as you read it, but it's a help, and I always just find it makes me a better reader. But Stephanie, I wanted to compliment you on your reading, and both of them were great, but I wanted to compliment you on the humor in the passage that you chose there, and I was so relieved to hear that there can be humor in that particular moment. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of those transactions, and I try to handle them with as much dignity and respect as I can, but I'm really pleased to know that they're able to dissemble those encounters and see the humor in it, and that was, a wonderful point for me, so thank you for that.
Oh, well, I've had a lot of moments at the door. I used to go door to door. I used to be what's called a pioneer, which is 60 hours a month that you go door to door. And so I've had a lot of moments that were not fun at all, And but one of my favorite moments, I was with another. I was really young at the time. I was 17 or 18. I was with another 17 or 18-year-old, and we went to the door of this man who apparently had just rushed out of the shower, and so he had a towel that just it didn't barely connect, and so he saw how just freaked out we were when he got there, and so he was going to play it for all it was worth. Come on in, It's like, yeah, I'll take a watchtower and away, that type of thing. That was really funny. We talked about that for years.
Ladies and gentlemen, one last round of applause for our authors.
Thank you.